Hello, everybody. Good night, good day, good afternoon. Okay, let me just share my screen as usual. Just get back to this.
Hi, Chris. Good morning.
Hey, how's it going, man?
Good. How are you?
Good. Are you able to talk like, or your family's sleeping, or?
No, I actually went to the office to participate in a meeting because at home the internet was like failing all the time.
Oh, okay.
But one of the cleaning ladies is starting vacuum cleaning here, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's like
We'll
it's
see.
it's interesting, like all the the sacrifices you guys do, just to be part of this. That's an honor for me, So thanks for, it's like everything you guys do. Is some people like, depending of the time zone, some people have to wake up like very early in the morning. I remember like there was a student who was waking up like at 4:30 or 5 in the morning, and then people going to bed at 3:30 in the morning. So yeah, I know it's super hard, and I wish I had like a better way to do this, but unfortunately it's the way the time zone works. The way I try to do the bi-weekly sessions, like the reviews, so we are not going to get any like this Saturday, but then Saturday of next week we're going to have some like the first review sessions. I have like them happening at 9 in the morning here in the United States, and then at 9 at night, so I can actually reach pretty much like everyone. So that's what I can do. It's like, because the weekend is basically like I have kind of like a free day, right? Like I obviously need time with my family, but having time like for the classes in the morning at night is not a problem at all. But I wish it was a little bit easier for everybody. But you guys are awesome for doing this. So let me just share this again.
Hello,
Uh,
Chris.
Hello.
Hello. Can I ask when it will be the first reviewing session?
Yeah, it's gonna be not this Saturday, but the Saturday of next week.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
all right.
So like, because
Okay.
like the first week is basically like we are getting used to this new process, right? Like building the sketch model and everything. But then I think tomorrow is Thursday. Yeah, tomorrow we might start like reprojecting stuff. So like
Okay.
yeah, and then for next week is gonna basically like we're gonna start the actual model next week, and then by the end of next week, then you're probably gonna have something you can actually show, But at any time, if you want to share anything in the Facebook group, I don't mind commenting. It's just like during the reviews, it's a little bit more complete because I take my sweet time instead of like rushing each one of you. I normally what I do, if you look at the in the past reviews, I mean, like sometimes it takes me like 5 hours in one session to go through everybody. Because I want to make sure that you guys are actually getting, enough information to go to the next phase. Kind of like, it's like all those notes and what I try to do as well. I mean, like sometimes the best work I see is the one I'm gonna be more picky because I can see the potential, and I start like really getting picky with stuff. But I'm pretty, good at just like relaxing, understanding that the process takes time. You just look at my work for the past 2 days. I mean, like it's still kind of like in a rough stage, but I mean, it takes time to actually, get into that point. So I'm gonna be very patient with you guys.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
No problem. So yeah, I'm gonna go back here because yesterday I posted some images. You probably saw my Instagram and Facebook, and it's basically like this is the model the way it looks right now. So it's a little bit more advanced than the one I stopped yesterday at the class. But to make sure that you guys are all in the same loop with me, I actually saved this session, like this sculpting session, which is basically like the one we started at the beginning of the class yesterday all the way to the end. And then I saved the video file and I uploaded it to your classroom, so you can see it in there. And it's just a continuation basically. And I also posted on my Instagram, so at least we see the kind of like the entire process, I suppose. But then for the shaders, when I posted the renders, it's the kind of stuff that, it's like I changed a couple of things in here, and I just want to start the class by updating you guys of what was done in here, so we're all on the same page. So basically, my scene in here, it's basically the same background that I was using before, right? Like that background I pointed you to, which is this veranda 4K, right? That's the HDRI map. But I'm not using a lot of it. Actually, I turned it off. I think I'm using just for reflections, if I'm not mistaken. Let's take a look in here. So if I go to this guy, and then I go all the way down here in the dome, the sky dome properties, you're gonna see here the camera, so it's not visible at all. So it's not visible there, but I think I turned it off. Let's see. Yeah, you see, illuminates by default, so it's not producing any light at this point. So it's there mostly like for reflection, I suppose, right? But not for anything else. And then I have like those area lights that are basically creating the entire lighting of my scene. Is just the 2 area lights, so they're very close to the face, right? I'm using this one here, like without the normalize on, and I'm using like 1 for intensity and 4 for exposure. This one here, 1 and 0, and this one has no normalize as well. So basically what I was doing, I had the head with the simple shader assigned, and I was just like, I did yesterday, and I was like in real time, just like seeing how much intensity I needed using the Arnold render view. And then once I was happy with that, I start tweaking the shaders. So let's do like a quick render here so you can see what I did. So let's go to this pose, and then if I render this, let's see what happens. It should be fast because there are no textures involved, and the model is like, I think it's like 450K polygons only, right? So it should render fairly fast. So it's already like refining there. So it's basically like a light on the side, just like to get a little bit of the rim here so you can see the silhouette of the face, right? I added this very simple shader, which is like a variation of the shader that I showed you guys yesterday, just by changing the color. So I'm gonna explore that a little bit. Let's just pause this one, move to the side in here. Again, my monitor, I just rebooted my whole computer, and it's still like acting funny when it comes to moving from monitor to monitor. So let's take a look at the shader here. So you see my model is still the Sculptris Pro that comes from ZBrush. So it still has lots of problems in the model, right? Like especially like if you look in the back here, probably gonna have like some artifacts and stuff. Let's see, right there, look at that. It's all like very cheap Sculptris, but it's cool because it's only like 400 something polygons, 1,000 polygons. So to see the number of polygons, if you are not familiar with Maya that much, you can always go to your display, and then you have your heads up display here. You can just click this poly count, and then that should pop in there. So faces, oh, interesting. This one says like, it shows as 844,000. That's weird. I could swear it was much less than that. Yeah, that's bizarre. See, like I have here, it says like 451. I hope I'm using the same model. I think it is, because I don't remember doing anything different than that. But you know, it might be something. Yeah, that's interesting. That's showing that big number in there. I don't remember, like maybe it's duplicated. I'm not sure. Anyway, it's a low resolution model anyway. For what we need here, obviously. I'm not using displacement map or anything. That's going to be something we're going to be exploring the next days. So the model came straight from ZBrush. The next thing I did was to create a couple of camera angles here. So I'm going to just click a view and click select camera just to see the settings I have. I switched to a 60 millimeters yesterday, if you remember, to simulate more like the human eye angle, right? Like what we perceive is around 55 to 60. And then with that in mind, what I did, I created a bunch of keyframes for my camera. So the way I do it, you just select the camera, make sure it's selected, right? You're gonna see like the border is selected in here. And then you can go to whatever angle you want. In this case here, this angle here. And since this is selected, you can just press S like Sam. Or if you look in here, you can just like select all those channels, right click and just say key selected. It's the same thing. So it's gonna create like a key. And then it's gonna show right there the little red dot, right? And you're gonna go to the next frame. In this case here, I rotated the camera until I got the profile and saved again. And then this one kind of like from the top, saved again. And you can save as many as you want, right? The advantage with that is that if you click the settings here, the render settings, and you have that assigned, let's say like 10 frames, right? You can render the first 10 frames, for example, all with keyframes in a single scoop. And the way to do that is, thank God they added this to Maya. It was kind of recent, probably like 2 or 3 versions ago. If you go to rendering here, you're gonna see under render, before you only have like the batch render, right? But now they have render sequence, which is really cool. If you click this little option box, You can pick whatever camera you want to use. In this case here, I have 2 different cameras, right? You have to make sure that the naming here matches the naming there. So now I know I'm rendering this angle. You can choose to actually click this add to render view. And that means that every single frame that's going to be rendered is going to be added to, to a pool in the render view. So everything is going to be accumulated in there. So you can actually just scrub through it and you can see all the renders individually. Or if you want to render straight to disk, then you can just ignore that, right? And then where are those files going to go? Basically, they're going to go to whatever you define in here. If you set your scene using the set project that we did like the very beginning of the class, the first day, and you actually gave a name for the file, right? That's basically where they're going to go. So if you're saving 10 files, like a sequence of 10 different frames, they're going to appear right there. So from 01 to 010, those are going to be the names, right? So every new iteration, I normally either I put like A, B, C, D, keep doing that, or even like A1, B1, 2, keep going with that, any name you want, just to keep track on everything I'm doing. And then, so basically, yeah, that's the way it works. So if I have this frame here, frame 1, this is the frame 3. If I just click the frame 2, it should switch automatically, start rendering that one too, right? And again, it should be like fairly fast renders because it's only like 6 samples for the anti-alias. There are no textures involved and the model is fairly low poly, right? So it should be pretty good. So I guess like each one of those images took like, I don't know, 5 minutes to render or something like that. And then I posted it, right after I was done with it. In terms of the shaders, let's take a look at what I did here. So if you click the model itself, you can either click the model and go to the last tab is normally the shader that's assigned, or you can just click this little button here. That's the display hypershade window. And then the hypershade window should pop, which is already here. And then if something else is selected, you can always select the model itself and then say graph and graph materials on selected objects. That should frame just the texture, just the shader for that specific object. So as you recall yesterday, I used the preset, the skin, right? So I went straight to skin. I used replace, just replace the entire thing. And the skin was very pale and everything. So I was showing you guys like goofing around, for example, like change the color here to green and showing you that this channel is not going to affect at all the skin shader as long as you have the subsurface scattering cranked all the way to 1 in here. So basically this is going to override whatever is set here, right, for the diffuse channel. And then the thing that I did was basically like change the color in here. I didn't change the radius. Yesterday I changed the scale, right? Remember, it was very scattery at first. And basically, like I said, if you use between 115 and 140 or something like that, that's going to be the ballpark for skin in general for world scale, at least in my experience. Some people like a little bit drier, and some people actually like mixing those channels with diffuse, right? So in that case, you're probably going to have some map plugged in here. And then instead of like 1 here, you're going to have a little bit less than 1 to be able to mix the 2 channels in there. So for the color I'm using for the skin in this case here is just like a, an attempt, right? Just like a first pass kind of thing. I'm using like 15 for the hue, saturation 0.865, and then basically like 0.036 for the last channel in here. And then that's basically the color I'm using. And this one I didn't change what was there already. Talking about this channel here, which is this the radius, this is an important one because that's gonna actually produce like the result of the skin scatter quality, right? And it's interesting because I don't think this one here that's part of the preset that comes with Arnold is exactly what they have in their website. So let's take a look, all the curiosity here. So if I switch from HSV color system here to RGB from 0 to 1. So what I have is like 1, 0.3, and 0.1, right? Now let's take a look at the manual online. If I do something like interesting, all this stuff that pops in there. So let's see if I go to Let me just double check here. Yeah, let's do just like Arnold 5 manual. If you just do something like this. So it's just gonna pop like, you know, Arnold for Maya user guide, right? And then you can do, let's see if it doesn't take too long. Let's see, shaders. The menu is very complete, by the way. You guys should go to this website, just like type like Arnold manual or Arnold 5 manual, and you should go straight here. It's very complete, like any questions you might have about shaders and everything, it should be contemplated in there. So let's take a look at the surface shader here. Standard surface, which is like the shader we are using, right? That's the Uber shader. And you can create like glass, metal, skin, everything with the same shader. And then if you keep going down here, let's see if they have subsurface, right? So click subsurface. And then I'm gonna have some very cool examples in there, some very realistic renders. They have like showing you like when the normals are pointing inwards or outwards, basically like it takes into account when you render. So make sure that the normals are always pointing out. And then if you scroll down here, you're gonna start noticing the types of skin and the values that you use here. So they say when rendering skin, you should use a value like 1, 0.35, and 0.2. It indicated that the red should scatter deepest and green and blue less. This would replace the 3-layer workflow, deep, mid, and shadow layers, for a skin where you would make the deep layer red to indicate that deep should scatter with a larger radius. Setting scatter radius, blah, blah, blah. So that's a very interesting thing to say, right? Like, because they have 1, 0.35, and 0.2. Now, the shader that comes with Arnold doesn't follow the same structure, right? So we have 1, 0.35, and 0.2. If I change that, it's gonna get more peachy color, much less than orange, right? So that's basically the recommendation. That's basically what I'm doing in the past classes. If you look through the videos, that's basically the settings I'm using. So to get that, obviously you have to change like the color system from Edge SV to RGB 0 to 1, so you can actually use it's like values from 0 to 1 the way they are supposed to work in there. In terms of SV, it's going to be converted to 11.25, 0.8 for saturation, and then 1 here for the color itself, right? For the value, right? Like how you say, like the brightness of it. So that's basically what I changed in terms of color. Everything else is the same. For the coat, I actually tweaked this a little bit. The coat is basically like it's almost like a clear coat, right? So most of the time you use this like for a clear coat of a car or whatever it is, but you can actually use with a very high roughness, and you can create interesting soft reflections and Fresnel and interesting effects using it as a secondary specular. And I use that as a secondary specular for the skin shader, right? But in this case here, I cranked quite a bit. It's pretty high, 0.756. So that's the tweak I did, like roughness is 0.741. You can always like pause the video later and look at those values if you want to copy anything. But obviously all this stuff, I'm just updating you guys on what I did yesterday. But when I get to, the meat and potatoes of actually exploring the skin shaders I'm using, then we're gonna have to revisit this, obviously, and then you can copy the values again. For the specular, I tweaked this one as well. So the roughness is kind of like right in the middle, so 0.5 or close to it. The specular a little bit lower. For the color of the spec, sometimes you can actually tweak this. I add a little bit of blue hue in here, which, is like if you have like a open sky, right? Like a nice HDRI that has lots of bluish light from the sky, you're gonna get that naturally. But in this case here, I just like added as kind of like an emulation, right? I could as well like just colorize one of my my soft boxes and get a similar effect, right? But in this case, it's very, very little effect. It's just a little tint of blue in the spec. And then everything else is default. So that's basically all the little tweaks I did in there. The sheen is kind of like a newer thing as well. Like for the past like 2 or 3 versions of Arnold, they added this. And this one is, even in the manual, they say like you can use this one to produce a little bit more of that simulation of a peach fuzz So you see like from a certain angle, you're gonna see this little halo that's created around the face. But because we're gonna be using actual peach fuzz, we're gonna be using XGen to create the peach fuzz. I try to avoid using this one. This is kind of like a simulation, you know. It's like if you have you're building like clothing, and you added the shader in there, you can actually simulate like velvet and satin and things like that by just like using a little bit of this, right? The roughness actually is going to dictate how shiny or you know more of a broad rough specular is going to have. So this is also present here. For example, if you go to the presets, yeah, and you go to velvet, for example, you click replace, your shader probably going to have something. You can actually do this now. So just to show you. So if you go to shaders surface in here, actually just shader, let's do create another standard surface. So this guy here, and that's the skin. So I'm gonna call this one velvet, just for the sake of it, so you can see how it works. And then if you click presets and you go to velvet and replace, so basically create like a purple velvet in there. That's the preset. You can obviously change the color or whatever you want to change. And let's check here in the shin. So yeah, they added like a weight pretty high, actually 1 here. For the skin, I would go much, much lower than this, like probably like a 0.0 something, you know, or 0.1 or 0.02 or something. Very, very low. Just to add a little bit of that hint. But like I said, we're probably not going to use it because of the, we're going to be using the actual peach fuzz. But it might be interesting if you want to try to simulate the oil in the skin, you know, maybe, you know, try to get some of that. Even for this guy, since the skin is darker, maybe I can try something like that, but I'm going to have to experiment with it. So let me just move this stuff out of the way for a second. Oh man, I'm still having trouble moving stuff from one monitor. Oh, see, it pops. Oh, yeah. Every time I put to the other monitor, it actually pops. Okay, now I got it. Oh, there you go. All right, so let's go back to ZBrush in here. So the model at this point here, although I'm actually, you know, starting to incorporate some more elements from my reference, let's actually pick the reference right here. Let's get it back. I'm still working with a little bit of that freedom that I gave myself, right? Like to experiment with the forms and everything. But I'm starting to actually incorporate more of certain elements, like you know, it's like the whole shape of the face. He has this kind of like a skinny face in there, right? Kind of like a little narrow, which might have to do a lot with the camera, like I said before, right? So what I did here for the camera, I actually clicked the 35 preset. It has the 50 and 85, right? So I'm using like a 35 preset just to have a little bit wider lens. And then I started actually just blocking things here, just like put a little hair in there, you know. To create the hair, like very simple, I just like painted the mask, right? And then paint the mask and you go to your extract. You can add a little bit of a thickness in there, click extract, then accept, and then remove the mask, and then you basically have a new object, right? So that's easy enough. So I just put those ones in there just to have something in there, but still like likeness way far, but just to have something I can refer later. But I'm gonna be continue the sculpture and trying to incorporate a little bit more form and try to improve the likeness. And also start maybe like building the ears, you know. I don't have a direct reference for his ear in there, but we can always get like someone else here. Like let's try to find another character with interesting ears, like this guy here, for example, right? And try to, you know, copy and paste, you know, like use as a reference and adapt, obviously, you know. And ears are fairly generic in a way, like they follow a certain structure, but then obviously they're proportion wise, they're going to change certain things. Certain areas going to get thinner or thicker. The angle of the ear is important as well, right? The tendency is to always build the ear completely vertical, right? But if you notice, like in the face, it always has a certain angle. I'm not going to say always because we have all kinds of exceptions, but for the most part, you have an angle, right? So it's kind of like you have a diagonal cutting that way. You can get any of them, like profile, you're going to see something like that. Let's see this guy. I see like the angle in there. It's kind of goes like, it follows the line of the mandible in here, but actually it's a little bit more exaggerated than that. It's almost like, yeah, it's kind of cuts almost straight like that, right? And then like we talked about yesterday, so the ear is going to be here, going to have a hole that's going to go into the skull in there. And then right behind it, you're going to have that the mastoid process, right? Which is going to be that connection that I mentioned. Here's part of it, right? That's connecting right here to the sternum. There's another head of it, like that's actually connecting to the clavicle in there, and that's going to go all the way that direction, right? But then obviously, if you're not contracting that muscle, or you're not like a super ripped guy, it's always better to keep this very subtle. So it's almost like if it's not firing, right, you keep it subtle. So that's basically what I did with the guy when I was sculpting yesterday. So first I put it on, like I was, you know, when I was sculpting yesterday to show you guys. And then I start removing a lot of it, right? So it's now like I made his neck skinnier because, you know, he looks pretty skinny in there. So it doesn't look like a bodybuilder anymore, right? At some point, things look a little weird, and then we start actually trying to find the character, and then we change things around. So let's take a look. Just so I have a reference here for myself. Let me take a look from like in the past. Let's see. Support students. Let's see. I want to get to the, okay, let's go to the class here, January. I just want to see in relation to the last class that I was teaching, if I'm actually following the program fairly okay, because I know I'm changing some order of stuff I'm doing. But today, according to that one, I would be talking about the HDRI render and settings today, but I already spoke about that yesterday. There are eye sizes. Maybe we can talk about that as well today, but we are not going to talk about the construction of the eyes just yet, but we can talk about the eye sizes in relation to the head, just as a reference for now. So let's do this first, and then we move to this guy here and do some more sculpting. So for the eye sizes, if I type on Google, I have my own reference I can show you guys, but it's always good to do this kind of like in real time too. Human eye sizes, or average size. Oh. You can even do like adult average size because they grow, right? So my Google searching here, oh man, I freaking hate this. I'm gonna have to find a way to solve this. Why is it popping to another screen every time? So the size of human adult eye is approximately 24.2 millimeters. So it's like 24 millimeters, right? And then, so that's, okay, 24 millimeters. And if you do the same search, human eye, you can say like iris. Human eye, iris average size. So that's basically like the average size is 12 millimeters. So that means like it's half of the size of the eyeball, right? So what I can do here, let's see if I can find it easily. Let's just save the scene here. Let's get to eye. And let's get to scenes, eye base. Let's see if that's the one I'm using here. All eyes. So that's like, okay, that's good. Just like from October. So this should be from the last class. And this is just an example of how I built the eye. We're gonna go through the whole construction process and everything later, talking about like how everything is put together. But here's just an example, and just to talk about the proportion, right? So let's see if we can do a little quick rendering here. I hope everything is in place to render it. Let's try that one here, and let's try to render them. Oh, it's converting stuff. Yeah, it's a lot of maps in there. For some reason, when I opened the scene here, apparently I would have to, reset the fact that I was like I had my load TX files that was off before, but apparently with the new Maya, something happened here and it's loading everything and trying to convert everything. So that's creating the TX files right now, which is okay, it's fine. But I'm probably gonna turn it off and save this file again. Let's see if it doesn't take too long. What's loading right now is basically like the displacement map for the sclera, and then displacement map obviously for the iris, and then all the color map, specular map, and all the other stuff that's coming in there. So let's see if it loads fast enough. Okay, it's gonna start. Yeah, once it's in memory, it should be a little bit faster. So. Okay, so I have a bunch of different ones here, like from different characters. I normally save them so I can have a little library of eyes I can steal from, right? Like I said before, it's always good to be able to reuse stuff you did in the past if it's working, and then you tweak just for that specific character. For example, like for my Indian guy, Native American, I actually decided to actually turn the eye, the color of the sclera a little bit more yellow than other ones. Because of my wife was fairly white, the whole sclera, like not a lot of stuff going on. So I'm gonna just isolate maybe just one of them in here. Let's get this one in the middle and just zoom in. So again, like we're gonna be talking about this in detail, how I'm doing this stuff. Actually, this is not the best example. Let's use one that has the caruncula already in there. So let's just get maybe this one here. Just press that one. So the way that I'm building the eyeball here, it's something I'm gonna have a full base, like it's gonna be a full lesson just like on eye stuff, which is always very important because it's the windows of the soul, right? Like, so it has to be very convincing and it has to work nicely with the character. But just for you to have an idea what's involved in here, it's not a lot. In terms of geometry, it's fairly simple. And I'm gonna explore a little bit of those while I talk about the scale as well, right? So you see that I have like the caruncula in here is blending with the rest of the sclera in here very, very nicely. It's a very, very soft transition. And that's because I'm using like a transparency map. But it's not only a transparency map. In Arnold, you can actually create a transparency, but the transparency map actually still represents like reflections and things like that, right? You can make something completely transparent, but it still has the reflection. But then there is another map that's actually opacity map that makes the geometry itself transparent. So if you combine both of them, this geometry transparency basically makes everything disappear completely, including all the channels. So if you have like specular and everything disappears. So it's important to use those things together because the blend becomes really perfect. It's like one specular from the caruncula itself blends into the specular of the eyeball, right? Like, and then when you have all those veins and everything, you can have veins sculpted in both objects, and they end up like mixing together when you have the render, which is really cool. And in terms of the number of geometry involved in there, just skip this one on the side for a second. I can explore this guy here and show you. I try not to keep super low res, so I have like a fairly okay resolution in there. And basically, like you see, like the back of it has like, it's like this kind of like star in the topology. It's because when you start with an actual sphere here as a primitive, it ends up like you start subdividing. That's the kind of like, it's like a topology you're gonna get. So instead of that, I actually use, I recut things a little bit. So let's do an example here. For example, if I'm gonna create an eyeball, and obviously I'm kind of like a little bit ahead of myself here because we're gonna be talking about eyeballs later, but just an example here. So you see, like, for example, like I have like this type of topology right in the middle. And if I move this around, let's just go up here. And let's just Oh man, this stuff drives me nuts. Just let me bring it here, okay? And then if I go to the, if I click this channel here, polysphere, that's gonna be like the parameters of my sphere. If I switch this all to, for example, like 8 and 8 here, you see that the model is, it looks like, okay, I can manage this geometry now because it's much lighter. But if you try to subdivide this mesh, it becomes an oval, right? It doesn't have enough topology to actually create the fullness of the sphere. So it ends up like becoming like this type of geometry, right? So what I normally do, I create like a copy of it. So for example, if I have something very high res, let's say 50 by 50 here, right? I can create a copy of this. So let's just zero it again. I'm gonna press Control D to create a copy, right? So that one is baked. And then I'm gonna switch to the original one, and I'm gonna change the parameter to something like I had before, 8 by 8, right? I can even move it around because I know I can zero it again. And then, so now I can change the topology. As I said before, if I try to simply subdivide this and use this part here as being the part that's gonna cover the iris, right? Like your cornea in there. So if I try to subdivide that with the modeling, mesh, and then smooth, that's gonna happen, right? You're gonna get this star right there, which is exactly what's happening in the back of the eyeball, right? So what I do here, normally I start by changing the topology here. So if you select those edges and you delete them, and doing both sides if you want, I'm just doing the front here. Now if I do this again, if I smooth it out, now the topology is much better, right? So what's gonna happen is that if you have like a lens in front of the eye and you have a star in the topology right in the middle, that's gonna definitely pinch when you subdivide. And the pinch is gonna generate, sometimes it can be very subtle, but it's gonna break the illusion that it's a perfectly mirror surface, you know? It's like, it has to be perfect. There's no way you can have any imperfection on top of the cornea, because otherwise, I mean, like if that happened to our own eye, right, it would create distortion in everything you see. It's like you look at something, your lens is gonna have some, you know, concavity and weird shapes going on in there. So it has to be like a perfect lens. So the way to do that is by changing the topology, just by deleting those 4 edges I mentioned before, and then you can have like a perfect surface for your lens, right? Now you see, like when I subdivided it, I still got the oval shape, right? And now it's subdivided. So let's zero it again, put like back to here. Now I have the sphere inside of the other sphere. Then normally what I do, I just like scale it up a little bit. And then you can do like, you can pick like the destination first and then the origin. I picked both objects with shift. And then you can go like, this is one of my favorite things in Maya, is this transfer attributes under mesh. So mesh, transfer attributes, and then you can go to vertex position, and then don't transfer UVs or anything, just the vertex position. You can say local or world, like world should work fine in here. And then no mirror or anything like that. So if you click apply, now the inner object snaps to the other object, right? So if I hide this one now, so now my eyeball should have like a perfect circle, perfect sphere. Although in real life, the eyes are not perfect spheres, right? I treat them as perfect spheres because it's an approximation and it's easier to rig and to have stuff like moving around, you know, moving around as a pivot if everything is a perfect sphere. But in real life, you're gonna have like, they're gonna be more elongated in one way or another, you know. But for the sake of it, that's basically how we're gonna do it. And then obviously later on, you're gonna be able to select a bunch of faces in here. I can actually expand, so shift, go up here. And then if I want to, I can actually create maybe like an additional set of edges in here. And then I can actually go here, oops, and maybe shrink this entire thing, maybe one more edge, and then shrink it. And then obviously the best way to do that would be if I had a reference underneath as well. So if I click another, create another span here, and I can actually work with it. So the whole thing here, the whole objective is to create this, this little bulge at the end. And this little bulge, we're gonna be talking about it. I can bring some references in here. And so basically we're gonna create the surface that looks like it's, you know, it's like it's fairly round around that area. And I think the best way to do that would be if you duplicated, for example, like the other object we just decided to hide. So if I have this one here, this sphere that's the high resolution one I just created, you could potentially, for example, just Control D, shrink it slightly, bring it up until you get to that bulge to the size you want, which should be like around 12 millimeters based on what we just looked, right? And then that would be probably like half of the size of the rest. And then you would basically like have something like this, right? So you could potentially, for example, like just group those two objects and then combine them. So let's see if I combine them like that. And now I can go back to my object right there, which is the inside one, right? And I do the same thing. So let's try this guy first and then this guy. And let's see if it's going to do correctly. Transfer attributes. And then let's hide this guy. Yeah, it didn't pop all the way there, but like, you know, it's like I can pop a little bit closer and it should be able to actually pop like straight away. If it doesn't, we can correct just manually. But what I'm saying is that it's important to have like a reference. And I do this a lot when I do like organic stuff, like hard surface, but like organic stuff from ZBrush to Maya, for example. As an example, like when I sculpted Bumblebee for the Bumblebee movie, right? Like it's just like not the internal stuff that other artists helped, but I mean like the main panels, like all the yellow stuff that you see in the body, like it had to be like parts of the beetle, right? So I actually brought, made in Maya, a lot of high resolution oval shapes. And then every time I would sculpt something that needed something very round with holes in the middle. So for example, like the arm of Bumblebee had like those little pieces with holes for the bolts and stuff like that, and some other cuts closer to the elbow. So I basically had that high resolution mesh as a buffer at all times. And I would go and then, you know, cut stuff in Maya and change the topology, open holes and stuff. But at all times, I would just use this transfer attribute to just snap back to the round surface. And that way you can have like curvature with like perfect holes in the middle of the curvature without pinching or anything, you know, as long as you have enough geometry, obviously. So that's just like a quick tutorial on the construction of the eye, the way I did it. And then obviously I probably pushed a little further by subdividing once more, something like that, right? See, it's like it's quite flat the way I have that part, but you get the idea. You can do a better job than that. And then basically what I had at the end was something like this, right? And then in terms of the rest of the parts involved in the eye here, so I have like this outer, which is like the sclera and the cornea combined, right? So it's just like all in the same piece. Now, up to this area here, I'm gonna use like a color, my color map and everything. And then from here all the way to the internal part and here to the center, it's gonna be a transparency map. It's gonna be like a circular transparency map. And so that's why it's important to have the UV map applied correctly. So if I go to my Windows modeling editor and then UV editor, you're gonna see that's gonna be round, right? Like, so basically like everything is gonna be pretty much in the center. So like you look at this in relation to the square, it's right in the center. And although it's not subdivided in the outer areas, it's subdivided inside, right? So it's fairly round, all those circles. And then this is basically like the front of the eye. And this is the other half. This is the back of the eye. The one I show you guys has the star in the back, right? I do this way because first, like you're gonna rotate the eye pretty much like you're gonna have a limit, right? You're not gonna go too crazy with the rotation to the point you're gonna reveal the second half of the eyeball, right? Unless you're gonna go, you know, zombie style in. So for that reason, I try to use as much as possible of the area of the UDIM with the front part, like the front half, and the back half I just shrink to something very small like that. And then that's not gonna be seen anyway. So it's probably like in the back of this, right? Ugh. Freaking hate it. I think I'm gonna have to actually change the resolution to match. I think that should help. Let me do this very quickly and see if that helps. Because that's gonna drive all of us nuts. So let's try to go to my desktop here. Just display properties, and this guy here is a very high resolution. Let's do I put like back to the same resolution I have for the other monitor. It's gonna be sucky to see stuff in there, but at least things should flow better now. Actually, it's doing the same stuff. It stops. It goes to a point and then stops. It's almost like I have some, oh, and now it went. I guess it's the gesture stuff that's, I see that's the little, oh, that's not good. Let's do like jet. Oh my God. So what's the name of that? Oh, it's accessibility. What's that? Accessibility. Let me try to fix this very quickly, but if I can't, then I'm gonna look at this later. It's not gonna spend too much time with this now. But I think it's accessibility because every time I bring it here, it gets that little bubble, you know, it's like that little control thing. So I'm pretty sure it's something related to that. I'm gonna have to fix it later. So let's go back in here to my scene. And so we spoke about the organization here for the UVs, and then let's look at the parts. So for the carunculus itself, it's just a simple object. I try to have like with both sides, right? It's kind of long in here because good part of it's going to be hidden anyway. And I like having both sides completely sealed like that because that way it doesn't have any leaks, or especially if you're using transparency like that, you want to make sure you don't have like, you know, weird stuff with leaking the scattering or stuff like that. So I'm gonna just go the same way I did with the eye. If I look at the modeling UV editor, so basically like this is the crappy texture paint in the ZBrush, which it doesn't have much of this anymore here in Maya because I actually reduced a lot of this stuff by tweaking the map here in Maya. But that's basically the UV I have, you know. So the UV is basically completely vertical. And the reason I do this way is because I can use a ramp, like a vertical ramp in here, and just start blending from this point on all the way until it blends complete to the eyeball, right? So I get that result right there. So it's important to actually plan, you know, it's like the UV position and stuff. So those are the two main objects in here outside. If I hide them, then the other two objects are very simple as well. There's a disk in here. Actually, this one has a fifth object, which is this one I did as a test, which is like a completely sealed, like a bubble, right? So it's kind of like for extra refraction. But I'm gonna tell you that this is kind of overkill, you know? It's like this kind of result, it barely makes a difference after I test a couple of different things. So it's optional. I can show you the settings as an option later on when we're exploring the eye a little deeper. But this one I don't think we need to use at all. So I just have a disk in here, which is basically like a lens, right? Like it's a little dark void right there for the pupil. And then this is basically like the iris geometry that we're going to be talking about when we start sculpting it. And the reason why I have it so high res in here, it's like 53K, is that I decided not to fight too much with, you know, trying to get like a vector displacement to work correctly, because each program has a different set of settings you need to use to make the vector displacement work. There's like tests you have to run in ZBrush. There are like, you know, it's like channels you need to flip to make it work correctly. I was like, I'm not going to deal with that. So instead of that, I just brought like a fairly high res, which is not bad, like 53K. So it has enough support for the displacement to just ride on top of it. So in ZBrush, you can export the displacement from the subdivision level 0 and up, or you can go to subdivision level 3 like that, and then export from that point and up. So that's basically what I did. It's just like the displacement is a difference between this level and everything that's above it, right? So that's basically the way I create the eyes. Now let's talk about the scale, which basically everything I did so far here, I'm gonna be doing duplicate, right? Because I'm gonna be talking about this later. But the main reason we are here is to talk about the scale. So let's go to the front view. And just like I did with the measure tools yesterday to measure the head, right? We got to the conclusion that about like 9 inches tall would be good for an average. So I'm gonna measure this here. Let's just hide all these other objects. Oh, I have the tier line as well. Forgot to talk about, but not important for now. And then let's just hide everything but this outer object here. So Control H. this guy here as well. So if you look at here, so I have like 24 inches, which is like an average, right? So it's probably like my object's not right in the corner, so it's probably a tiny little bit bigger than 24 in here. And then I have another measure here that's like, if I select both of them, those are 12, right? I added another measurement in here. Basically, like this measure here says that the iris is about 12 millimeters, right, from side to side, and then the eyeball is 24, so like half of it. The iris is half of it, right? But then I add this other value here that's 63, and this one is a curious one because that refers to the distance between the pupils, right? So if you look in here, I put you know, those little constraints, those little locators in here, saying that that's the position of the pupil. Yeah, again, if you Google something like a pupillary distance, like this, for example. Here we go, trying to bring this window in here. So that's basically, you see, average pupillary distance, 63 millimeters, right? Now there's a trick about this, right? Because a first thing that's very deceiving is that the pupil is rarely right in the middle. And that's a thing that I always thought it was caused by the refraction of the eye. You know, it's like the liquid in the inside of the cornea and everything was causing this impression that the iris was actually out of center, but in fact was right on the center, right? But it's actually not true. The pupils are actually offset very slightly. Some people have very offset. So you have like the iris and the pupil is like very offset from the center. And like I said, I mean, like I thought this was just caused by the refraction, but it's not. It's actually the position. On top of that, there is a rotation that happens in the eyes when you look from the top, for example. So if I look at those eyes here, and I select this guy, you're gonna notice that there is this one here. Let's see if there's a rotation in there. Probably not. I don't think it's registered in there. I think the only way to see is if I actually reset it and then I did it again. But I would say like the ballpark is about like 2 to 3 degrees outside. So basically like the way it works is like this. If you have your character with the eyeballs completely facing forward, both of them, right? Like at 90 degrees. So you've modeled your eyeball, you put all the pieces together, and then you left it unchanged, right? Like completely facing forward. And you put both eyes in your character, is guaranteed that the character is going to look cross-eye, right? You're going to put it in there, and then you're going to have to try to fight it by actually changing the corners of the, you know, the eyes, like changing the position of the, you know, the eyelids and everything to try to accommodate and make it look less cross-eye. But that's the incorrect approach. The correct approach is to actually basically like just rotate outwards, I would say like between 2, 2.5, 3 degrees. And then have that as basically being your neutral pose. That way you can actually construct, like put all the elements in place and still have like an eye that looks correct. The way that I always exemplify this is that I always use this example, like, because that was kind of like part of my childhood, was to have this books called was like the Magic Eye. I don't know, you guys are too young for that. But the Magic Eye was basically like a set of fractals. So each page had a lot of fractals. And then you could not see anything at first. But then if you crossed your eyes, you could see an image popping like three-dimensionally. So you would pop like in space. But the thing is, like, if you did with the cross eye, if you crossed your eyes to force to see that, the effect was the opposite. So for example, if you had a pyramid that was supposed to pop out of the paper, you would see like a concave version of the pyramid. You would see the reverse of that effect. The only way to see the effect correctly, if you do, instead of like going inwards with your eyes, like go cross-eye, you have somehow bring your eyes outwards to be able to see the effect correctly. And the trick that I normally recommend in the book, because it takes some time to actually learn how to do it correctly, was to hold the book right in front of your face like that, and then very slowly just like lower it and focus on a point very far away from where you are. You know, so you'll be like focused to a point like far, far away. And that way you actually get used to your eyes actually going and looking outwards slightly. You know, it's like when you look to a distance, your eyes go slightly outwards like that. And that's why it's important when you build a character that you want to make sure that it looks alive, that you add this rotation to the eyes, because that way your character looks like he or she is wondering about, having actually thoughts about stuff, especially if you have a lower angle, it's like you put your character in there with a lower angle camera, and then the character looks like he's thinking about something ahead, so it's important to have that little rotation in there. So after I added that rotation of 2.5, 3 degrees outwards, then I measured the distance between the pupils. So if I hide those guys, which let's see, let's hide those top ones here. Let's keep just the bottom ones so I can see better. So here, we can actually even measure this, like how many degrees I have here. I can actually do, like, let's say Control D. Let's move it out. And I'm gonna roughly just, probably like not the perfect thing, but just to get like a close enough to straight. So let's just freeze this on. Freeze, transform, center. But actually, it's because it's inside of the same group. So let's ungroup it. So freeze, reset, center. And then the center, obviously, because now I have that bulge in there, it's not going to be right in the center, right? So I'm going to have to actually force it. And but since we're going to be rotating in the other direction, it should be fine. So let me just move this to the center around here. And then if I compare it to this guy here, let's try to rotate close enough and see how many degrees we get. So let's see if I rotate all the way around here. It should be like close enough. You gave me like 2.5, like I said, rotation, right? 2.5. So that should be, around here would be 90, right? So 2.5 degrees should be pretty good in there. But I mean, depending on the person, you should have variations, obviously. But this one, 2.5, close to that. And then once I have the rotation in place, like I said before, then I place the pupil position in here, and then I measure it, and then I have 63 millimeters between them, right? Now, the curious thing is that this is a little interesting trivia. You're talking about this with Sven in my second class, I believe. And then he mentioned that, for example, like in drawing books, when you're drawing like the distance between the eyes, right? And you can see this, for example, with, I think I have it here open somewhere, like head proportions, right? So basically, like those are basic drawing, schemes and things like that. So it's very common to see this kind of representation, right? Like one eye, then the same distance between, like for the size of the eye, there's the same distance right in the middle in between the eyes, and then the second eye, right? So you're gonna have like 3 eyes distance between them. But when you talk about eye, we're not talking about the eyeball, right? Because the eyeball, it's smaller than that, because you have the caruncula in there, you have a lot of stuff going on other than the size of the eye itself. So it's funny because when you remove everything, you strip everything else, the distance between them, there's a gap, right? It's not like the eyeballs are, it's like one against the other one, and then that's the size, right? So basically you're gonna have like 24 inches against 24 inches against 24 inches. No, it's basically like you're measuring from the opening corner to the opening corner. And that's wider than what we have here, especially around here, because we're gonna have the caruncula, right? And that's what caused the difference. But this is between the eyeballs in here, there's a little gap in there. We can actually measure it. Let's see in average how much you could get. So create measure tools, distance tool. Let's do this from here to here. That's about like 6.5 millimeters I got for this specific model by using those averages, right? I have kind of like correctly like 24 millimeters, 12 millimeters, and then 63, which is basically like all the average stuff. It gave me about 6.5 millimeters distance between one eyeball to the other eyeball, which is interesting. Again, everything is very approximate, right? Like my eyeball, for example, is not a perfect 24 millimeters. It's a little bit bigger than that. And also the fact that the eyeballs can be a little bit more squashed in a certain way and not complete spheres like that, right? So you might get a slightly larger distance or slightly smaller. But as a ballpark, I mean, like that's a pretty good, you know, approximation right there. So that's what you want to work with your model. So if you have those sizes, basically in comparison to the size of your the head of your model after you scale, like we did yesterday, like 9 inches for the height of the head, right? This should work with that. So what we can do here, we can actually select all those guys. Let's do this for a test. We don't need the top ones here. We can just say like export selection, and let's switch to Maya binary. Just save like that. Let's see. Let's do like itemp. Let's just bring this to our initial scene and see how they behave in there in the context of having the you know the head already scaled, right? So let's go back here to the previous folder, scenes. Let's open the initial scene. It's not saved, this one, fine. And now let's import in here. Let's see what happens. It's probably going to be out of place, but we can actually bring them closer. So let's do an import. And then let's go to scenes, and then switch to Maya scenes and itemp. So import it. Let's see where they went. Probably like higher. Still loading. Okay, so let's get the eye here. No, that's not it. It's probably here. Okay, it's all the way down there. So let me just select all this stuff and group it. So itemp, blah, blah, blah. Oh, it's not too far. Actually, it was pretty close to, yeah, it's right against the 000 in there, in the world. So if I group everything, let's see if it's groupable. And let's move everything up. And front. It's probably not going to match because I'm basically like eyeballing everything, right? For the character. So far, I didn't measure anything, but it's fairly close. The eyes could be a little bit closer than that, but I mean, like considering that some people have so much variation, right? It wouldn't be too impossible to have the eyes a little bit more, a little bit wider in position than what we're putting in here. But yeah, it's not too bad. I would have to probably like bring each one individually out slightly, right? And I obviously have to sculpt better the caruncular area in there. Let's do something here. You can always do like shading, and you can say use default shader, and now you can actually see things. So let's try to hide like this temporary eye in here. Let's see how far off we are. We're kind of off in there, but not too terrible. So you see, like I didn't scale the eyes. I simply brought from that scene. And in terms of scale, they should be pretty good for this head, you know? It's just a matter of like really repositioning things a little bit. And in this case here, let's say if I get this eye, I can maybe bring it out a little bit. And then that eye can bring it out a little bit. And then everything else would I would have to actually correct in the sculpture, right? So I would have to do a little adjustment here and there. So like the upper lip, the lid is very, very forward. The bottom one is too much back. So I would have to actually bring this eye probably a little bit back like that and match the lower lid first. And then the top one, I would have to actually shave a little bit of that lid and then bring it back slightly. But that should give us like a decent eye in there. Obviously, it's intersecting with the back of the eye in there because it's just like a rough sculpture, right? But if we try to render, I don't know if this would work. Let's see. Maybe we can try that. Let's see if it works. So in terms of scale, I didn't change the scale at all. What I did, I just moved the eyes out just slightly to match my character. So let's see if that makes any sense. Obviously, the color of the eye is going to be very different for this character, right? Like I would have to go like with a much darker tone. Although there are all kinds of variations as well. You know, it's like there are like people with very dark skin with like green eyes, and you can see like some people, like old elderly people, like in those tribes, sometimes with cataract and stuff. So sometimes you get some very interesting eyes, right? In this case here, his eyes, yeah, because I just added the eyeballs and I didn't adjust the eyelids. He's probably gonna look a little crossed eye still, but then I know that the rotation is kind of correct, so I can work on that later. So yeah, that's kind of like what I had like in terms of the eye size, and that's gonna be like the ballpark. And then one thing that I forgot to mention is that although my the size of the iris is correct in the model in there, there's a transparency map I use to actually blend between what's completely transparent in front of the cornea and what's the sclera, which is the white part, right? So in this case here, I actually can make the iris slightly bigger or is slightly smaller by tweaking that transparency transition. So seems like the iris in this case here looks a little bit small, and I would have to actually grow it a little bit, right? And I can do that with transparency because in terms of the topology and the mesh itself seems like everything is correct. It's just a matter of like just expanding a little bit by tweaking the transparency in there. You guys have any questions about this stuff so far?
Well, in my case, I think is just what I think a little bit what you said, right? Like there is a standard eye, but then you can see like very weird people that I have seen scans at work that you couldn't believe, right? Like,
oh yeah,
this guy, look at the eyes that this woman has, or that kind of stuff. How do you deal then with? Yeah, you said at the beginning of
look at those eyes.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
You said at the beginning of the program that you use slightly smaller eyes.
In terms of when I'm stylizing stuff, for example, like for I have this tendency of making the eyes normally like smaller than they should be, but I would say like it's not like the correct approach if you're going for something super realistic, but it's part of like my personal style of doing things. You know, it's like I always end up like getting the eyes a little bit smaller than what they should be. But I think I'm gonna start to correct that. You know, it's like from now on, try to get things a little bit more correct, and forget a little bit about the style. And then at the end, I might go back and try to stylize things a little bit more. The Native American guy was supposed to be much more stylized than it turned out to be. But it's just because I got in so much trouble at the beginning, trying to make the guy look like a Native American by crossing lots of references, that I was like, man, it's such a fine line to just like make the guy look like a Native American first. And if I try to do this plus a stylization on top at the same time, that's not going to happen. So that's why I had to go like more realistic with it. But yeah, eventually like those characters I want to do like kind of like new versions, you know, like I did it with my Hellboy. I started with a realistic version of Hellboy and then completely stylized it. So yeah, something like that, I would say.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, like reality is pretty cool, but it's also a little boring, right? Like if you're gonna go just try to nail one-to-one everything we see without putting a little bit of our own preferences, right? It's kind of like ends up a little bit sterile, I would say. So it's cool to just like pervert the form a little bit. There's a good example of that. That's like Michelangelo, right? Michelangelo Buonarroti. What Michelangelo did back in the day to me was incredibly, you know, it's like courageous and different. You know, it's like which is like playing with the scale and masses and genres, right? For example, like you look at the Pietà, like Virgin Mary holding the dead Christ, right? And you look at the proportions of those characters. Virgin Mary is massive. She's so big, you know. It's like she's in fact the mother, you know. Although she's holding an adult person, like Jesus Christ is an adult person, she's this gigantic, powerful woman right there holding him. And her breath, you know, it's like you look at all the women that he used to paint and sculpt, you know, it's like massive arms, you know, it's almost like a male energy in the women. And the males are all like very feminine and, you know, it's like a fragile in a certain way. So I thought it was very interesting, you know, it's like that the guy, it's not because he didn't know how to sculpt like perfect anatomy for women and men. It's just like that was his own trip, you know, it's like to actually reversing those roles and things. So I always think that's interesting when artists bring their own spin to things. And then since you're doing like a class about portraits and things like that, things can get a little bit boring sometimes. So it's always good to keep it fresh. You know, it's like if you guys can add a little spin to your own characters, you know, like a little bit of your own style, it's always cool. You know, it's like I rather see style and life in characters than something that's sterile. You know, it's like it's just like, okay, yeah, someone is using texture XYZ for everything, and then you know, scan like textures. The model was starting from a scan that was just cleaned up. You know, it's like it's very cool from the technical standpoint, and you know, it's like the kind of like as a challenge to create something like, oh man, that's super realistic because it's based on all the possible information you can extract, right? But in terms of style and artistry, it doesn't quite sell sometimes. You know, sometimes you see models like perfectly proportional, and they don't have soul. You know, it's just the character looks dead. And then sometimes you see a character that's completely stylized. Just look at Pixar movies, and then you see like a lot of life, and there is like intention in the character. You look in the eyes, the eyes communicate with you. It seems like he's wondering about something, you know. So I think like I always lean more towards like style, as long as the model looks more alive than something more sterile, you know, and completely perfect, you know, in quotes. So yeah.
I also have another question if nobody else.
Sure, yeah, go for it.
So the wetness of the eye, you usually use geometry to create that. Is that correct?
The wetness, you mean?
Yeah, the liquid. Right?
Oh yeah, underneath like the tear line.
Yes.
Yes, just a geometry. It's kind of like it's a very simple geometry. It's like if you, I used to skateboard. I always use the term like half pipe, right? It's kind of like a half pipe. So it's a very simple geometry. It's just like a basically like if you have a wall that's made out of one single polygon and another one at 90 degrees, basically like an L shape, right? So if you subdivide that, you're gonna get like a perfect, you know, it's like a curvature, like a, you know, one quarter of a circle in there. So that's basically how I make the eye, the tear line. And like when I start like sculpting the eye and show you guys all the pieces together, I'm gonna be talking about it and how I texture it, the type of bump or displacement I'm gonna be using to just break up a little bit of. It cannot look like a mirror. It has to have a little bit of a waviness to it, and it has to be just enough to catch like little highlights, but without being overwhelming and just like shown just like as a full-on. You know, it's like entire object you can actually see from corner to corner. You can actually see just like little highlights. For example, like this guy.
You're using the geometry because you can apply textures to it instead of like the round edges in V-Ray or other solutions, right?
Yeah, for example, like in this case here, you see like the tear line is in there, but you only see like 1, 2, 3, 4 little highlights. Another one in here, another one in here. It has to be just enough to catch that highlight, but without being overwhelming, you know. And there are like lots of little techniques I can show you guys, like to create like a perfect blend between the eye and then the eyelid. So yeah, that's definitely gonna come in the next sessions. Okay,
and at work, is it the same?
Oh no, man! Like at work, everything is very different. I mean, like they used to have a very in my opinion, very weird geometry for the eyes. And then at some point, like they asked me like how I was doing my eyes because one of the TDs really liked my renders. And we decided to incorporate some of my ideas and then they combined with something else that they are doing in there. And then it became, you know, it's like the result was a better result at the end. So it's like it's always like there's always someone with an interesting idea at the studio, and then like we end up like just mixing ideas and coming up with something slightly different. But overall, I think it's similar to what I'm doing these days. You know, I just think that for the tier line, they have an automated system. They create this stuff automatically. You know, they don't have to sculpt it.
And they don't have to rig it then.
Yeah, it's just like the script actually creates it and plugs in there, and already moves with the geometry. You know. Cool. Yeah, it's pretty automatic, but in our case here we're going to be sculpting by hand.
Better.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
Hi, man.
Hey.
Uh, I was just wondering, what does actually the SSS scale controls? So like the bigger the number, the deeper the SSS goes. Is that what it is?
It's all based on the color. If you play with the color, for example, like if you add more saturation to the red, you're gonna notice like the result's gonna be looking very different. If you desaturate a lot of the red, you're gonna see it's like they said, it's almost like each layer, for example, like epidermal, subdermal, you know, um, uh, everything is gonna be controlled by one of those channels, like a red, green, and blue, instead of like having a three channel layers. You're gonna have just one channel, but controlled by three colors. So it's a matter of like just experimenting with it. But I would say like it changes a lot the final aspect of the model. You know, sometimes you have like a color that's too saturated, and you start rendering stuff, and then everything looks very waxy, and then all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden you start desaturating things just slightly, you know, and stuff start like happening and looking more natural. So it's a very touchy kind of control in there. But once you have that color nailed in there, it works great. And I would say that as a starting point, that those amounts, those values that they pass at the manual in there, they're very good. I mean, like I think most of the stuff I don't even touch after I put those values in there. But obviously, what you can do to improve that even more is to you can, for example, like paint a texture, right? And use like as the base that exact same color for the radius. And just like for certain areas, you can actually go a little bit towards different colors or more saturated or more desaturated in different areas of the face. But starting with that color as the base, you know, I would always trust that color. Sometimes you can even plug like a color map and just go like to the offset channel and just like plug the color, this general color we are talking about, and then
Mm-hmm.
actually be able to actually colorize that map to go more towards, you know, that color. So yeah,
Okay,
I
cool.
always think it's a little overkill. You know, I tried in the past to use maps in there, and then every time I would plug like a pure color in there, in my opinion, would look better. You know, it's like it gets more milky in a certain way, so the skin looks a little bit more naturalistic. But I have to experiment. For example, like trying to maybe like add some veins in there and add some green stuff. You know, it's like in that channel as well instead of just the color. But it's just because when I add it to the color, it seems like it does the job. So you know,
Cool.
yeah,
Thank you.
no problem. So for this guy, let's do a little sculpting here and keep talking about the process.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
I have a question. It's a little bit more related to yesterday's session, but I guess it applies. I was noticing as you were just sculpting and sketching,
Mm-hmm.
seemed like you were doing a lot of more straight strokes with your clay buildup, not a
Mhm.
lot of curved strokes around surfaces.
Mhm.
Is that conscious? Does that buildup form better for you, or am I just seeing things how?
I when I sculpt with the clay build up, I always try to imagine things as being like a kind of like a drawing, you know, I sketch, and
Yeah.
then I try to you know, approach things very very squarish at first, and you know, and later on I start like making things a little bit more round. So first I start blocking the forms. Let's say, let's get this a little bigger here. So like I said, for example, if I'm blocking like let's say like the zygomatic, right? I'm gonna try maybe like with some broader strokes, but then I'm gonna start cutting like in a different direction with very short ones, and then eventually I'm gonna start like actually chamfering stuff. So for example, if I have this little area here, which I know like my zygomatic muscle is gonna come from there, so I'm gonna start probably like carving a little bit, like creating like a square line in there. And to reinforce this, sometimes what I do, I just rely on the H polish brush, that one, and then I can actually reinforce like areas, for example, like around here, and really create like a, you know, some. It's always good like to evaluate, for example, like from distance, right? A common mistake also is to actually model and add all the detail and all kinds of stuff. You know, it's like make the model very complex from the get-go, but then you go from a distance and the model falls apart. So I always try to look, for example, like those things I add like to the zygomatic bone, which is a very, very important landmark in there. I want to look like from a distance. I want to flip my model upside down, take a look like if it works from a certain angle, sideways, you know, and then make very tiny in the screen like that. If the model falls apart at that point, then I know I need to do more work in there. But yeah, it's like, I guess it's a little bit like style too, you know, it's like to just define things a little bit more kind of like squarish first, and then go for the rounder forms later. I always like to see that aspect when I see like a real life sculpture, you know, like you know, real clay sculptures. When you have like, it's same way with drawings too, you know, sometimes you get like even like some very famous artists out there who basically like make everything super smooth in the inside, and then the silhouette you get like those very straight lines. Sometimes they're very striking. It just adds to the rhythm, you know. It's like when I'm sculpting creatures, the thing that I pay attention the most is like the silhouette and how one form flows into the next one. So for example, like here now you have like the silhouette feature right there in ZBrush, right? You get the little thing there. In this case here is just a face. You're not gonna get a lot of unusual stuff. But if you're sculpting a creature, for example, I wanna see, for example, like if I have a straight line defining the zygomatic bone here, I'm probably gonna put like a much rounder one next to it, so I can have like my eye actually follow that structure, right? Like it's almost like you plan a sculpture so the whoever is observing it, the eye can travel through the sculpture and analyze all the forms that they are there, right? So you're gonna have like the outer silhouette, and you're gonna have the inner silhouette as well. The inner silhouette's gonna work the same way, especially with creature stuff. You're gonna have like these straight lines ending into like a more round line. One form becomes the next one. So for example, if I'm doing like a drawing here, let's see. This is all part of also stylizing things, but doing in a way that's very subtle, you know, instead of like going too crazy with stylization. Otherwise it becomes kind of like a cartoon at the end. But just using a little bit of stylization is always good. So for example, if I'm treating this guy as a creature, I probably would start like picking areas like this, and then, you know, it's like trying to travel to different areas and then cross that with other different lines I can cross, and then try to find a rhythm, you know, it's like how things gonna flow one form to the next one. Yeah, again, like I can do that with a human, but I have to be more careful with it because I know that certain things have certain limitations there. But with the creature, I just like going to town, you know. Let's see if I can bring it very quickly here. Get this guy project. Man, that's a lot of icons. There's something messed up. Yeah, it's messed up with my reorganization of stuff. So let's get this one. This guy right here. So this guy right here, right? It's fairly human in shape, the face, but that's kind of like when I was sculpting it, the intention was to actually have this printed in wood, right? Someone's gonna carve this in wood for me. But I was actually tripping on this kind of stuff, you know. I was like, so if I have like a very organic face, I wanna make sure that if I'm going for a creature, I'm gonna try to look for those rhythms, you know. It's like there are a lot of going on in here when it comes like to, you know, the way it establishes zygomatic, the way it ends, where it starts, you know. I stylized like the wrinkles around this area here as well. There's a lot of very organic forms, but there are also some harsh ones as well. So I think it's always very interesting when you're doing like creature stuff to actually follow and try to add rhythm to everything, you know. It's like every time you find like an opportunity to add some rhythm, it's important. Now for this guy here, doesn't stop me from doing that for him as well at the end. But at this point here, I'm probably gonna stick with like the anatomical stuff first. But then within it, to make sure that everything is more elegant, then obviously, you know, later on I can actually just use my clay built-up or whatever brush I'm gonna use to actually chamfer certain areas to create more rhythm, and I was like add some more squarish lines combined with a little bit more of rounder lines, you know. Yeah, it's like it's all fun, man. It's like It's that's the thing, you know. It's like I do a lot of creature stuff at work, and especially a lot of hard surface stuff at work. Like you know, most of my work I think I ever produced at ILM was like hard surface, like for transformers. But it's the kind of stuff I'm not passionate about. You know, it's like I do because I know how to do it, and I'm gonna do a good job if they give me something to do. But I like organic stuff better, you know. And but at the same time, like when it comes to creatures as well, I did a fair amount of them as well. But I don't think I am that good at creature work to the point that I'm going to be able to teach a class. You know, I'm pretty sure some people are going to enjoy it, you know, for a reason or another one. But it's just like the self-conscious kind of thing, you know. It's like
Yeah.
I see so many people like kicking ass with creatures and stuff, and then it's like, okay, I don't want to feel like a hack, you know, doing that. I already do this with portraits, you know. It's like the people like kicking ass with portraits, and I already feel a little bit like a hack. But if I do this with the hard surface, it's gonna be terrible because, you know, how can you compete with someone like Vitaly Bugarov, you know, or someone like that?
That guy's insane.
Yeah, so it's hard, you know. It's like there's a bunch of hyper talented people out there.
Chris,
Yes.
for the hard surface stuff you mentioned,
Mhm.
do you also sculpt and then do retopo in Maya?
It all depends of the model, what the demand is, you know. So if it's a model that's very organic in form, like in Transformers, you're gonna find like some guys are very boxy, especially the ones modeled for Bumblebee. Bumblebee is basically like the only one that's rounder, and the rest of them are all like based on the old school Transformers, so they're all squarish. But the ones that they want to make more organic, normally they pass stuff from me to me. And what happens sometimes, like some artist starts it, and some of those guys are incredible hard surface modelers and have a great understanding like of how machinery works and everything, but they don't have like a strong foundation on organic stuff. So I end up like just doing like a pass and then passing back to people sometimes, you know. It's like nowadays, I mean, like there's a lot of artists like who got much better at what they do, you know. But in the past, I would do this a lot. Actually, they would pass me like you know, some models and like, oh, can you do like an organic pass? And I would do some fixes in there and then give back to the guy, and then they continue with that, you know. But yeah, I mean, like for Bumblebee, like I was saying before, I started as a mass model in ZBrush. So like I blocked the whole thing in ZBrush, like a very sketchy kind of thing, kind of like what I'm doing here, but more like a hard surface sketch. And then from that point on, you try to get the approval of, okay, so what about the proportions? Are proportions correct? No. Let's improve this. Let's make the legs a little bit longer, whatever, you know. And then you do those passes, and then you get the model back, the notes back, and then you take one step further, and then you keep presenting just like mass model versions, you know, it's just like blocked, super rough stuff. And then once the proportions are approved, then it was like, okay, can I start modeling now, building the model? And then it's going to be a combination of sculpting stuff in ZBrush, you know, it's like the most organic stuff, and then going to Maya, refining those pieces, or simply starting straight away in Maya, you know, and getting stuff done. Like it's a combination. Just like with starting those models, like from a sphere, from a base mesh, or from a cube, or whatever it is, it's just a matter of like it's the options we have, but there's no like right or wrong way to do it. It's just like
Right.
what you're more comfortable with, you know.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So let's do a little ear work here. Let's get back to my. The ear is an interesting one. It has lots of interesting forms, and the tendency is to make it very beefy, like I have in here, right? It looks super thick, but the ear is fairly delicate in many areas, and sometimes when you make it too beefy, it doesn't convince, you know. So let's try to find one here that has a little better angle, like that guy. Although it's gonna be a little different from the ear I'm sculpting for that other character. But since I'm not married to anything here, everything's gonna be fairly free. So for the ear, we're gonna have like a bunch of main forms in here, and all of them have names, but I never memorized them anatomy-wise, right? Especially like coming from Brazil and coming to the United States when I was already 30. 32 actually, I think, when I got to the United States, and had to learn English at the age of 32. So a lot of the stuff I knew, like based like the names learning Portuguese, right? A couple of them, obviously, like because they're in Latin, you can actually get away and remember certain things. But a lot of stuff I never memorized. I'm terrible at that. One thing that makes me feel so terrible is like back in the day when Andrew Kars from Anatomy Tools, he was inviting me. I did the 3 of those classes with him, like as a guest instructor. So I would basically help with the ZBrush part of things, and he would do the anatomy stuff because he is a freaking master at that. And he knew every single name of everything, right? Because he does that for a living. And I was just like trying to help him there, and I would be always impressed, it's like how much the guy knows when it comes to every single muscle insertion, everything. It's pretty impressive. I'm not that good at the naming anatomy. I'm pretty good at like perceiving the form, I guess, but not that great at the the technicalities of it.
Chris,
Yeah.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I have a question.
Yes.
Talking about the cranium, what is the best way? Talking about the cranium.
The cranium, yeah, the volume.
Yes. What is the best way to study the true size of the cranium if you have the hair?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like when you have the hair, it's so deceiving because if you're working from a certain reference, it's how can you tell how much volume you're gonna have? For example, this guy here looks like he has very low volume, small volume, but at the same time, the angle of the camera and the distortion is actually causing that impression. He probably have a very normal sized cranium in there. So I would say like the first thing I would start with those little schematics, it's like for the drawings that we find very easily, and just get stuff like this, for example, what's the proportion, for example, like from the front and the side, right? So some of those books, they're gonna show, for example, if you have a square, right? So the head's gonna be sitting right in the middle of that square. It's not gonna fill up the square because the ear is gonna be much shorter than that. So it's like it's a more vertical version. But then from the profile, the square is gonna go not like this one here, that the square looks smaller. But if you get like a full head with the nose included, probably from closer to the tip of the nose to the back, you're gonna have like almost like square, right? So that's like I would say like start with those references if you just go like head proportions, and then that gives you like a ballpark about the size, for the cranium. There's some landmarks in there, interesting. And you see like from the closer to the tip of the nose all the way to here, you're probably gonna get like close to a square. And then, yeah, I would say start with that. And then remember what I said yesterday, which is like from the top, you're always going to get this egg shape, right? So for example, from here, you're going to see like closer to the brow ridge in here, towards the brow ridge, is going to get narrower. And then as you go towards the back of the head, especially behind the ears, you're going to get more of that volume in there, In my case here, I still have to correct because it seems like here, I still have to bring it in slightly to define the temporalis a little bit more. It's a little bulgy in there, but definitely you're going to have this egg shape from the top, So if your model by any chance is looking like, it's looking more like this from the top, right? That means when you look from the front, then you're going to be missing all that volume in there, right? That you should be seeing, like, especially like I said, like behind the ear in there, which my ear here's a little detached, by the way. I have to fix that. Yeah, I would say that, man. Like I start with some drawing proportion books because those guys already did all the work for us. It's like if we look back, I always love like looking at the art history and stuff, and so the whole thing that happened with the Renaissance, right? The Renaissance was basically like those guys rediscovering all those excavations of Greek art and just like getting totally into it and being fascinated with how amazing everything was and trying to discover, it's like in what causes those pieces to look so perfect, proportion wise. And then studying all those proportions, it's like in trying to break this into a number of heads and all this stuff that we do even today. It was all created back in the day. And I was like those guys like Albert Dürer, did a lot of studies. Like Da Vinci did a lot of studies as well. It's like breaking down. It's like trying to, okay, looks so perfect. How did these Greeks do something so good, right? And then you start trying to rationalize it and like, okay, let's break into mathematical terms in here. What's happening here? And it's so effective that we still use the same ideals of beauty and everything to this day, right? Like, centuries later, we still use the same stuff. But yeah, they already did all the homework for us. Like, so if you are looking for information about proportion for the head, you're definitely going to find a lot of it in the form of, it's like art books for like drawing and stuff like that and painting. So yeah, definitely.
Yes, thank you.
No problem. One book that's very cool, I don't think I have it mentioned in there in that website. It's our Anatomy for Artists. Let me just check. Actually, I think it is mentioned in there. This is another one. It's called Artistic Anatomy. Artistic Anatomy. And this is by Dr. Paul Richer. And he is actually professor of anatomy and in the School of Fine Arts, in Paris. And so this guy here, not only like a doctor, right?
I think there is this one.
Oh, you have it?
Yeah, also in the reference.
Oh, yeah, it's there. So this book like is cool because the guy is a doctor, but also like, it's like he knows his anatomy like artistically as well. And so this one carries a lot of stuff about like head proportions, and all the muscles and bones connected to it. Everything is going to happen not by accident. So for example, if you have like a landmark like the one I mentioned yesterday, the mastoid process in there, so that one is going to indicate so where the mastoid muscle is going to connect the sternocleidomastoids. The position of the ear is going to be driven by that as well. Everything is very integrated. Once you have like locked just the proportion of the head, then you're going to start like analyzing, okay, so why do I have like this area in the back a little bit wider? And then you're going to start seeing like, okay, so the temporalis muscle is actually driving that. It kind of like opens up a little bit towards the back of the head. And then you start getting a little kind of like putting the pieces of the puzzle together, But this book is really cool. It has like not only like the surface muscles, but he goes like a couple of layers deep, which for us here is not very interesting, right? It's cool to see the insertion position and everything. So for dynamic anatomy stuff, but just for the surface anatomy, just like, I would say just like the fat pads and the most external muscles should do enough for us. But yeah, it's a cool book, man. It's really cool. It has this awesome drawings of those old school looking guys like that. It's very, very cool. So let's go back here. Let's do a little bit more work around ears. See like how beefy they are from the back in there. See like how I have everything very, very blocked. So let's just do a little cleanup in there. Let's put the reference on the side for a second and just like focusing here and do a little cleanup. So I just use like my clay build up, like a very large one. And I start like bringing everything back. I'm gonna define this line here a little bit better as well. And sometimes it's good to actually just get the standard brush with a little pointy tip and then start like sharpen things. So let's get the intensity of maybe like 7 or 8. So I can actually just define like some sharpness around here, right at this edge. I'm gonna make it a little sharper and then I'm gonna dig it. So I have like some depth going towards that area. And this one is going to carry all the way around here. So it kind of like has a curvature. It's all the way. It's kind of like a helix shape in there. Around here, you're going to start having this split towards here. So we're going to have like this little lid in there. But then this is actually going to branch out to around here. Just smooth it out a little bit, a little cleaning. I still have very low resolution here. Eventually, I'm gonna have to start breaking it a little bit further. And then the ear in here looks terrible. So we're gonna just start building a little bit more of this volume around here and removing some of that. So let's just use my Alt and move. You're gonna see like most of the stuff I do in ZBrush is using like the most basic possible brushes for all this blocking process. So it's gonna be like the standard brush with the alpha plug to it, the move brush, especially using Alt for moving towards the normals, and the clay build up for most of the blocking the forms, you know, it's like secondary, especially secondary forms. So mostly like primary form is gonna be move brush. Most of the secondary form is gonna be clay build up. And then for defining certain things, like defining, you know, center lines and whatever it is, then I'm gonna use this modified standard brush with a little point. So I can actually do that. So this area here, this is gonna depend on from person to person, where the position is gonna be and how deep this is gonna be as well. But normally this area here is gonna have more depth. So we're gonna get some more depth in there. Keep going around. Here, depending on the person as well, you're gonna get a little deeper or not so deep. And this is another thing that that I started noticing more and more as I sculpted more and more portraits, is that, for example, we have like this little Y shape here, right? And I have like this little, so you have like this depth right here in the middle. And then you have this form and that form, kind of two coming together. But it's interesting because a lot of times this little guy here in the bottom gets very, very thin. Sometimes you're gonna get beefier, but sometimes it's very, very thin. And it doesn't simply merge and becomes this forming here. Sometimes it actually creates a natural break. So basically like you get a little bit of this line, kind of like almost like going towards that. And it's very interesting because like you can see certain people like this very, very sharp line. I don't have enough resolution, but just add some sculptures here, just so I can add a little bit more detail. Let's see. I'm gonna sharpen it a little bit more. And then when I get here, just gonna, a similar thing. Still a little bit like a bit too wide, so let's just build up some more here. And at this point, I'm not looking at the reference, so it's kind of pointless to just, but I'm gonna keep going for a little bit. So let's just, oh, let me turn off my sculptures again. Otherwise it becomes super slow sometimes. So I'm gonna start rounding this area here a little bit more, and I'm gonna add more depth as well, because I wanna make sure that this wraps around this form and go all the way back here. I'm gonna dig this a little bit more. And then here I can actually raise this little guy slightly to create this interesting forming here. Same with this area. There's a cartilage in there, right? You can feel in your ear. It's basically like everything is cartilage. So you have this hard frame underneath. And then from here is like soft skin. And the soft skin in here, like depending on the person, is gonna be either hanging, or in the case of this guy here, if I go for the full portrait of the guy that I have as a reference, this is gonna be very saggy with a hole in there, right? It's gonna probably like, it has lots of different pieces in there. From here, sometimes you get like a little bit of a depth in here and a little bit more volume in here. It's you know, it's like all kinds of variations of ears as well. Like, and the ears are apparently they don't stop growing as well. You see like old men with gigantic ears sometimes. And it's funny because it seems like it's such a slow process of growing, but then they don't stop, right? Because sometimes you see like little kids with completely like adult size or even bigger than adult size ears, and you think, oh my god, this kid's gonna grow to become Dumbo. And then he ends up like becoming like a normal ear, you know. But then probably like later on as an old man, it's gonna start again like the process of growing again. I don't know what happens, but ears are interesting. Same with noses, right? Seems like all those areas with cartilage, they tend to keep growing for some reason. So it's still very beefy in there. Let's just get this shape a little bit. And then obviously if I'm just blocking it here, I can go back to my move brush and then, okay, let's say like, okay, it's getting too big. So let's do a little tweak. Maybe the angle can come a little bit forward. Let's angle a little bit. Same way I was talking about the rhythm before, same thing here, you know, it's like if you have something that's going very round around here, sometimes you can introduce like maybe like a little bit more of a straight line, kind of like around here, right? You can come with a little bit more of a straight line around here again. You can do those things like either to reinforce something, some feature that's already in the model, or out of your own will, you know, it's like just, okay, I think it would look cooler if I have a little bit more rhythm, a little bit more of a square line combined with some rounder ones. Let's do that. So let's see, again, let's take a look at the reference, what I have in there. Actually, you know, best reference is to go to Palomita's amazing archive, right? And look for some ears in here, I guess. Because I bet she has all kinds of ears. Eyes, she has plenty in there. Pretty awesome stuff. Let's see. Lots of dark skin. This is cool. It's interesting shape for the ear. Not quite what I was looking for. This one's more interesting. Holy moly, look who's there. Look, this guy here is an interesting one. Oh, very small resolution though. Well, it can be any. It's an interesting one. Let's go for something similar to that. And let's maybe keep it here. Just make it bigger. I know what you guys are thinking, like there's a program that you just like, you can put all your reference on the side and it's pretty cool. But man, I'm old school. But this is not gonna help if you keep doing that. Okay, cool. So let's do that. And so yeah, this ear is quite different from what I'm sculpting here in terms of proportion, but like let's adapt a little bit. Let's add some of those forms, but I want to make it more interesting. His ear looks a little simple in there. Just gonna get some of the elements more aligned with something that's real. So add a little bit more depth around here. And just like I said before, like, you know, that little guy, oh man, why do you keep doing that? Okay, that little guy right here. Oh, this guy here, although he has a little bit more of curvature, so I'm gonna bring it down slightly, but very thin, right? If you look at the reference in there, it's almost like it's a little waxy in the look of it because of the cartilage underneath. So that's basically what I had to do for my Stan Winston guy. If I show you the example here, images, see if I can find one with his ear, like kind of sideways. Let's see. This is kind of partial. This one maybe. Yeah, you see like what I did here, like where we had the cartilage and stuff, I actually painted a slightly yellowish and whitish just to kind of like get that kind of look. And then in terms of the rhythm I was talking about, like you see there was a little straighter lines in those things. So of course, like I'm trying to match what my reference was in a sense, but I kind of like added some of those straighter lines and stuff. But in terms of the texture later on, when you're going to be painting it, I always add like for those areas of cartilage or areas had like a lot of fat tissue underneath. So you're going to see like landmarks like the underneath the nose in here in the cartilage, you know, the fat tissue underneath the eye bags. And also in this area of the ear, you're always going to notice something a little bit more like whitish, yellowish, and sometimes even a tint of green added to it. And that I do normally like in the texture to reinforce this look of, you know, it's like there is something that's hard underneath, right? In this case here, his ear is going to have like the cartilage. So I'm probably going to be painting this fairly whitish in there. not whitish because I mean, like this guy sculpting has a much darker skin than that guy, but even though the skin is going to be very dark, you still have a lot of room for skin variation. You know, it's like I was looking at some references of someone with a very dark skin, and in some of those areas you can get like much lighter. Actually, you know, you can go lighter and actually add like different tones mixing with it. So you're gonna get something to look more interesting. I hope. But like I said, I never know what's gonna happen, right? Always where is this model gonna go? Like in 3 days, it might look completely different from this. If you look at from the first day, right? It keeps evolving and hopefully moving forward, never backwards. But sometimes it does. Sometimes we have to reopen some old file because you just lost the soul of the character somehow in the process. But hopefully, it's not gonna happen with this guy. Hopefully, you're gonna be trying to uncover his soul as we go.
Chris,
Yeah.
Regarding to that you just said, how often do you open all files and compare what you have done from a previous year? Because like there are many days that I open something that I did like a week ago and it looks better. So I kind of like do that very often. I have done it today a couple of times already, looking back what I have done. How often do you experiment or you look back?
I wish I could say like that's very often, but it's not. I mean, like sometimes I have memories, you know, like I'm sculpting something and then all of a sudden I get a little bored and then I was like, okay, let me take a look at like some of the old stuff I did. And then I started looking.
Not the old stuff from another character. Same version that you're
working.
the
same. Oh man, I would say like not very often. It's kind of like if I post something on my Instagram, for example, right, and then I post a new version of it today, and then I compare the two of them, and I noticed that something in there that was kind of special, and I missed it. For the most part, I would say like I'm a little weird like that, and I try to keep pushing forward, even though I know I had a better version. I always have this in my mind that okay, I think I can do better this time, right? And sometimes I can't. Sometimes it's just like it's lost, but I still keep pushing forward. So sometimes you're gonna notice that some of my previous versions of my models, they look better, and it's just because I kind of like I don't know. I think I'm just very lazy. I try to avoid like revisiting too much. But sometimes if it's something that's really important that I really missed, then I would, you know, have a problem like just rescuing some file. It's just funny because I'm so deorganized in my own personal work. At work, I have to have everything organized and named correctly because the next person has to be able to find everything. So I'm pretty organized at work. But at home, I mean, like every time I post those images, instead of like having a name for the file that actually represents that, you know, it's like in certain date or whatever, I never do. So if I have something that was better than I have now, normally I have to track by looking at the date I posted my Instagram and trying to match like, okay, so what's the latest thing I saved before that date? And then try to go for that. But that just shows how rare it is for me to kind of like try to dig something, because I always keep like, okay, let's move forward. You know, it's like if I miss that, let's try to do it better and then keep going.
Recreate it, maybe.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, but like I don't know, man. I'm a little weird like that.
I'm just trying to avoid that because sometimes it's just so frustrating. That's like, God damn it! I just lost. I just lost a day doing something that I thought it was cool, and then you open it, previous version, and it was better.
Oh man, it's like exactly, and especially like the stuff you do at night, and then you open in the morning. Jesus Christ, it looks so bad sometimes. Yeah.
The thing that you are doing, like with adding, having the Maya scene, so in a very early stage, I think that is something that helps to judge your model better and probably not go backwards and stuff like that. So that's something that for me right now is actually, it's going to change the way I do things from now on, right?
Yeah, man, it's very cool because you have an actual camera that you know it works, right? It's proven to work. Instead of like trying with ZBrush and, you know, given the chance that, oh, the camera now is good. It was like, it's still not. I mean, like they did a great job upgrading stuff, and I freaking love ZBrush, man. I feel bad every time I say something bad about it because I freaking love. And ZBrush pretty much like put me in the map. You know, it's like coming from banking background in Brazil. You know, it's like being discovered on the internet, like mostly because of the ZBrush back in 2003, 2002, 2003, something like that. So yeah, I freaking love it, and the people at Pixelogic are amazing too. You know, it's like all of them, so nice. But some stuff in ZBrush just drives me insane sometimes, especially the basic stuff that should be fixed a long time ago and it's not. But
Chris.
I trust that Ofair has it's like great ideas coming up, and yeah, yes.
No, everything that you guys are talking about, I was wondering when you when you mentioned being node school and not, looking for new softwares for reference and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I was wondering, how do you feel you, both artistically and software wise, what do you think you changed the most from the beginning of your career and where you are now? Because all of these things you're saying that you don't want to go back and you just keep pushing forward, that feels like experienced confidence to me. And how do you feel like Chris 15 years ago is compared to Chris now? Like, what are the things that you kept doing the same way, and what have you abandoned, that stuff that you used to do? Like, sometimes I feel like I spent way too much time like gathering for reference, for example, because I'm kind of afraid of starting something, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So how do you feel like what are the areas you feel like you progressed the most, and what are the ones that you're just exactly the same?
Yeah, I would say like one thing that I had that I did, like I learned, I think was with the challenge, the CG challenge I did in the past, is that I learned a little certain discipline when it comes like to, okay, how much time I have to finish a task, right? It doesn't need to be like the best perfect job ever, but it has to be presentable as something finished, right? So that helps me to actually try to push and keep pushing, like in those classes, although I'm exhausted at the end of the day, to push and try to get my models, as ready as possible when the class is over, right? So that's one thing I think I improved over time, to kind of like manage my time, and I think that's comes with experience working in a big studio too. But there's a lot of stuff I still do the same, it's like as a human being, like we have all those things to do. But in terms of references and everything, I think what I used to do that I really loved, and I don't have the chance to do anymore for a long time now, is to actually dig deeper into software. For example, especially coming from Brazil, like you're Brazilian too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So coming from Brazil, you know how difficult it is for us to be able to afford stuff in there. It's like learn English almost like kind of like forced, right? Like you kind of like go to every single menu of the software and explore each one of them and click every single button, and just to see what each one does, because you don't fully understand what it says in there. And then I miss those times, it's like being this explorer as a younger guy. And then as soon as you get like to a big studio, it's amazing in a way, because like basically like, okay, that's my objective is fulfilled because I finally got where I wanted to be. But then after a couple of years, you realize, okay, I kind of miss that freedom and that curiosity I had before. And then as much as you want to have that curiosity these days, it's basically like you're tired all the time. It's like it's just like it sucks a little bit of your soul, because you're focusing on something very important, like for most of your days. And
production's overwhelming, right?
Yes, very overwhelming, and it doesn't leave you a lot of room to explore as an artist. So that's why I keep insisting to people, like, no matter how hard it is for you, make time for your personal work. If the way to do that is by creating a class, like I did, so I force myself to keep working. That keeps you sane. It's like you go to a production house, a big one, and then there are many owners of a project, right? Like you have like hierarchies and supervisors and the director, and then there are the investors on top of everything else, and then you end up like sometimes like frustrated because you can do better a certain thing, but you are kind of stopped from doing better because there are like people who think like doing a certain way is better. And then basically, like, because you're working for someone is not your personal work, and you can never take it personally. Those things are done because you're basically getting paid to do something for someone else. Then what's left is basically like, okay, at the end of the day, what I did for myself, right? I actually worked for someone else and I made all this money for them, and I made my salary and it was great. But then what did I get out of it, right? I cannot claim that that work is my work, because there is a huge team behind it. And how can you take credit for something when a lot of people actually worked on it?
Too many cooks in the kitchen, eh?
Yes. So it's very important to do your personal work. I think like I see myself like in a bunch of years from now, maybe not even doing CG, to tell you the truth. You know, it's like maybe I'm gonna be like in a house. My dream is to actually have like a nice farm, not a farm, but a barn that I can actually have some wood shop in there, so I can actually build some furniture for our family. You know.
Amen, man.
Yeah. So you never know where it's gonna take you. You know, it's just like life is so interesting that I mean, like I lost my parents like pretty young. My father 32, my mom 55. You know, and then I never thought I would leave Brazil ever. I thought I would be a banker for the rest of my life. You know. And then all of a sudden, like you're presented with those crossroads in your life, and then there's always at least two options, you know, for everything. At least that's how I feel. And then you just like, okay, I'm gonna take this one here. I'm gonna be careful. I'm not gonna take too many chances because, you know, maybe there are people depending on me. But you keep going, you know. It's like, and I think that's how I feel about everything, including my personal work. Is like keep going, you know. It's just like. Let's explore, let's see where this is going. And I think the important thing that people don't realize is that if you never went through shit, like real shit in your life, people are not going to value how much is important to actually overcome stuff. And then when it comes to personal work, it's the same stuff, you know. It's like, that's why I don't think I'm afraid of trying something like doing live, this kind of stuff without editing or anything, just because like in a certain way I don't give a fuck. But in a certain way as well, I think like you said, I'm confident enough that I'm able to actually overcome something, you know, because I went through shit.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
great, man.
That's the
And if you
philosophy.
ever have the barn for the wood, sculpt your creature in wood, man. That thing looks freaking awesome.
Oh, thanks, dude. Yeah, I would love to. I mean, like I built stuff like I built cabinets for our kitchen. I built the kitchen, the dining room we use in our kitchen. That's like on wheels. I keep doing stuff around the house. Installed the hot tub in here. And the funny thing is that I never knew any of this stuff. I was raised by my mom. I didn't have access to anything. And as an adult guy living in the United States, I started like getting addicted to watching YouTube tutorials of everything and then learning about everything.
But dude, in Brazil, people don't do that stuff too much. Out here, they do it more, right?
I know, right? Like
the do-it-yourself stuff. Yeah, I feel the same. I built my entire house when I moved to Canada.
Oh, that's
in Brazil,
awesome!
I never knew anything. Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like in Brazil,
with the floor and stuff. It's people do this stuff here way more than back home.
Yeah, paint the house, right? Like I mean, like when you're in Brazil, it basically like there's always someone who knows like a painter or a pedreiro, right? Someone like a pedreiro.
Yeah.
And there's like it's normally someone who charges like almost nothing, and then he comes to your house and builds a bunch of walls in there and stuff. Yeah, it's funny, so funny.
Right. Cool. Thank you, man.
No problem.
So that is basically this how you deal with frustration at work?
Yeah, I would say so. Like, I think like when I went to THU years ago, there was a student and he came with his portfolio, and the guy was extremely talented. He was doing like 2D stuff, maybe a few 3D in the middle there, but mostly 2D. And then he was like, his question was like, okay, so what if I get a job in industry, okay? And then someone is going to be commenting on the work that I'm doing, and it's going to be questioning why I did it in a certain way, and probably going to ask me to redo stuff. And I might think that the work looks really good the way it is. I don't know if I can let that go. I was like, well, maybe this industry is not for you then. That's basically what I told him. Because I told him, like, if you enter this industry thinking that your work is so precious that it's completely untouchable, you're doing the wrong thing already, you know? You have to be prepared to work for someone And your whole job, just like you have like a job, like if you're working for, you know, like a hardware store or like a, you know, anything, any simple job out there, or cleaning houses, you have a job that you're doing for someone else. You know, you cannot say like, okay, I'm gonna clean the house this way because I like it. No, basically like the person paying you to do that is gonna ask you
it's
like,
not personal.
yeah, can you clean under the couches because you're doing a terrible job not cleaning under the couches? And the person just like, no, I feel like you know, I'm doing enough. I was like, no, dude, you're gonna get fired in 2 seconds. You know, you're doing the work for someone else who is paying you, you know, hopefully a good amount of money. And I, you know, it's like, I hope you guys are valuing what you do because it's important. And then in exchange, they're making profit. They're not doing this out of their good hearts because they love you and they love your art. They're doing this because you represent numbers, right? Like it's the amount of profit you can generate for whoever is hiring you. So I think that's the whole point. You know, it's like if you're getting into this industry, like a brand new guy getting into the industry or girl, I mean, you have to have that in mind. You know, it's like that's not your work. It's the kind of work that you can be proud of, especially like, you know, it's like you do something like that's becomes like a major movie, or it wins a bunch of awards and stuff, and you can actually talk to your team. You know, it's like, and that's going to be in the memory forever. You know, that movie is going to be forever in there. You're going to remember your team mates, you know, it's like the people who actually made your model look really good in the screen. Thank them, you know. But it's not your work. I mean, like, it's a work you can be proud of, but it's not your work. But then when you come to your home, then you're the director, you're the art director, you're the modeler, you're everything. And especially the ideas are yours, and they're basically like untouchable, right? Unless you have like someone very opinionated, like a son, who tells like, Dad, I don't think this looks good. then you have like little bosses in your house, like I do. No, they are actually pretty good at that. They don't give me a lot of shit. So
it's actually good to ask young people because they don't have filters, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah, that's true.
I really ask a lot to my nephews because they can tell you right away that's horrible or that's really cool, right? So it's a really nice feedback, actually.
And they're so brutally honest, man, those little kids. It's amazing to watch. Yeah. Well, guys, we're going to stop for now. And tomorrow we're going to try to start like some projections. So I think I'm kind of like going to keep going for probably another half an hour here. And then it's good enough for start projecting, you know. What I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be using the base mesh I normally use for all my characters. But just to save some time in terms of, you know, topology and all this stuff. Like I mentioned before, you can download the model that I made available in the classroom in there if you want to. But just bear in mind, don't trust it too much, okay? Like, it has a decent topology, but it's not perfect. And if feel free to just change the topology, recut things, or just come up with your own topology, or use zero mesh or whatever you want to use. But you know, it's like at least like maybe like this weekend, if you have the time, maybe to have like a base mesh you can use. And then let's do some reprojection tomorrow. In the past, I would do everything manually, and I can show a little bit of how I do the projection manually. But we're going to be basically using ZWrap tomorrow. And they give a trial. If you never tried it, there's a trial you can download, and you can do it, you know, it's like for a whole month. So that's going to be more than enough for our class. We just need like for maybe like 1 or 2 days anyway. And then for you guys who actually tried in the past and maybe like you don't have a way to get a new trial or something, I mentioned before that I have a couple of licenses still left from when they gave that away to our school. And then if you use those, I mean, the license, just make sure that when you post anything online, just give a shout to the guys, you know, it's like they're super nice. And all they asked in return was just like, give it a shout, you know, it's like if you use our software, just, you know, post like a hashtag or something, you know, ZWrap, or, you know, and that's basically what I'm going to try to do as well. So thanks a lot, guys. I hope you're enjoying it. I know that the classes my answers get a little longer sometimes. Sometimes I extend myself, like yapping my mouth out. And, you know, it's like, it's really cool to have you guys around and exchange ideas, you know, it's like being together with other artists is the kind of stuff that drives me the most. So thank you. And I see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. See you
Thank
guys.
you. Have a good night.
Bye.
See you guys.
Bye.
Have a great one.